The mask has fallen. The facade has crumbled. The NASCAR we thought we knew is gone. For nearly 80 years, fans believed this was a family-friendly sport, good old boys just racing for fun. But the cracks were always there. Beneath the wholesome family-run image sat a closed fist. The warning signs weren't there just in 2003 or even 1972. They were baked into the sport from day one. And now finally, the foundation has officially been broken. Stock car racing in the early 30s and 40s were chaotic to say the least. Shady promoters hyped big prize pools, ran races with few rules, and then vanished with the money. Bill France Sr. saw an opportunity in that disorder and founded the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing, NASCAR, to bring it to order. But this wasn't a league with shared governance. NASCAR had one boss, and that was Bill France. One man set the rules. If you didn't like it, tough. Think of Bill France like Vince McMahon in the WWE, except Bill France keeps his pants on. But one thing was common between the two, was that it had a single figure at the top calling every shot. As the years went by, NASCAR went beyond its southern roots into a national juggernaut. Tens of millions of people across America tuned in, but the iron-fisted control never changed. From drivers being punished for running in rival series to the 1969 Talladega fiasco, moments in the sport that still follow it to its core even today. The message had been clear from the very beginning. Challenge authority and authority will crush you back. Like any ruler threatened by organization, France hated unions. Again, I will use wrestling as an example. Jesse the Body Ventura tried to form a union before WrestleMania 2, and Vince McMahon caught wind of it thanks to a certain yellow Hulkster, and threatened anyone who attended with immediate firing. And as a result, the union died before it even began. Curtis Turner, one of the sport's biggest stars in the early 60s, partnered with the Teamsters to push for benefit plans including pensions, insurance, and scholarships for the children of drivers who died in crashes. You know, pretty normal stuff that you would expect in any profession, especially a sport as dangerous as motorsports. While some drivers initially expressed interest in the union, prior to a race at Bowman Gray Stadium in North Carolina, France laid down the law prohibiting any union members from ever participating in NASCAR events. According to accounts of that day, France told the racers, "I'll use a pistol to enforce it. I have a pistol and know how to use it." Turner and another driver in Tim Flock refused to back down. However, France had the upper hand and banned the two drivers for life from ever competing in NASCAR again. They sued seeking punitive damages and restitution, arguing the ban violated right-to-work laws, especially since test driving contracts $150 a day plus expenses were canceled. NASCAR countered, however, saying that drivers weren't employees, they were independent contractors, and the France family held the upper hand. You know, now that I think about it, when people say NASCAR is a WWE of motorsports, they weren't kidding, the parallels are striking. But by 1966, both Turner and Flock were reinstated, and while Turner returned, Flock would never compete in another NASCAR race ever again. But France didn't reinstate Turner specifically out of a change of heart, but because NASCAR needed him. The sport was in a bind. Two-time champion Joe Weatherly died on January 19, 1964 after a crash at Riverside. Fireball Roberts, another superstar in NASCAR at that time, died after a fiery crash at the World 600 in Charlotte on May 24, 1964. Track owners around the NASCAR world wanted Curtis Turner back. On top of that, NASCAR had even more problems in terms of car shortage. Chrysler boycotted over their Hemi ban. Richard Petty, another NASCAR superstar, went drag racing as a result of the ban in 1965. And Ford, who was in dispute over their engine with NASCAR, was also impromptu banned by the sport in 1965. Survival forced reconciliation. That's the only reason why Bill France even wanted to bring Curtis Turner back. It wasn't out of the goodness of his heart, it was to save his sport. Now let's fast forward to one of the most infamous weekends in NASCAR history, the inaugural Talladega race weekend in 1969. The message remained: no unions, no dissent. That did not stop the PDA, or the Professional Drivers Association, from forming. They insisted it wasn't a union, but functionally it was. Led by Richard Petty, Bobby Allison, David Pearson, and Cale Yarborough, they refused to race on unsafe tires. Talladega's steeper banking shredded the rubber on Firestone and Goodyear tires. Firestone pulled out and let any driver that was under contract with Firestone be able to race whatever tire they choose, even Goodyear. While Goodyear kept trying, hoping that a result would come about. But drivers wanted a postponement until a safe compound existed. Bill France, on the other hand, said no. He needed this race to run. He was in major financial debt. A delay would have been a disaster for Big Bill, both professionally, but most importantly for his wallet. Our members are race drivers first and accept the risks involved, and a PDA statement wrote in 1969 on September 18th. But when these life and death risks become both unreasonable and unnecessary, then corrective action is essential. France even drove a Ford Torino around the track, claiming it was safe in order to help cool tensions, lapping the track at 175 miles per hour, which he claimed was a new world record for a 59-year-old man, and he told racers that if they were concerned about speeds, they should just slow down, which, seriously? Yeah, great idea, Bill. Let's tell a bunch of race car drivers to slow down. Anybody with the brain knew that was never gonna work. Eventually, someone would push it, and then another would follow suit, and eventually drivers would all be at full throttle. But even with France's effort to show that it was safe, drivers noted that he wasn't at full throttle, and tensions continued to rise. Then, the breaking point. France told Bobby Allison, Leroy Yarbrough, and Richard Petty, quote, "You guys are trying to form a union. If you're scared, go home." At an instant, Leroy Yarbrough stepped in front of Allison, punched France Sr., and then barked, "Boys, pack your stuff up, we're leaving." And while the founder and owner of NASCAR was lying on the ground knocked out, the PDA walked out. But France, after he regained his footing, pushed forward. He decided to make a promise for fans that bought a ticket for the 1969 Talladega 500 that they were able to use that ticket for a free entry to the 1970 Daytona 500. Lower division cars were bumped up to fill the field. Only 3 proper Cup cars would start the race. One of the replacements would be Richard Childress, making his first Cup start because of the walkout. I wonder how his relationship with NASCAR happened after that. Soon after, the PDA would collapse itself. The message was reinforced. NASCAR was France's way or the highway. If you don't like it, leave. But what happens when NASCAR is wrong? Like, severely wrong. We're talking falsifying statements wrong. Do they admit it? Well, history says no. Tim Richmond, a shooting star of the mid-80s, didn't fit the traditional mold of a NASCAR driver. His lifestyle was louder and faster, to say the least, a complete 180 from the country boy archetype. In 1987, he fell ill and missed the Daytona 500. Officially, it was double pneumonia for the reason of the absence. But rumors started to swirl of a more serious and deadly sickness going around that Tim had, called AIDS, which had been a very hot topic that had been rampant throughout America in the 80s and 90s. He returned at Pocono for race 12, and even though he fought gearbox issues, still won the race, and then won again the next week at Riverside. However, his health continued to deteriorate, and would resign from Hendrick Motorsports not too long after. But he would still try and attempt a racing comeback for the 1988 Daytona 500. However, NASCAR had other plans. NASCAR would suspend him for banned substances. Days later, the drugs were identified: Sudafed and Advil, over-the-counter medications. In April of '88, Richmond would sue NASCAR. He retested later that year and was reinstated, but no team would touch him. The damage was already done. At Daytona in February of '88, he held a contentious press conference, denied drug abuse, said a mistake had been made, and stormed off. The suit was settled out of court with the term sealed. Unfortunately, Tim Richmond would never compete in another NASCAR race ever again, as on August 13, 1989, Richmond died at 34 from AIDS, and his family would confirm his death from the disease 10 days later. But then something very fishy and corrupt would come about from NASCAR's case in regards to Tim Richmond. Months after his death, a WJLA-TV reporter in Roberta Baskin reported that Dr. Forrest Tennant, then the NFL's drug advisor, falsified tests used to keep Richmond out of NASCAR. Sealed court documents and interviews indicated NASCAR targeted Richmond and built a substance abuse policy with him in mind. In the 2010 ESPN documentary Tim Richmond to the Limit includes Bill France Jr. admitting the drug test was not a good test. Another crack in the foundation. Because drivers were concerned with Richmond's safety, and specifically his health, NASCAR, even though they knew it was not a good test and that Tim Richmond would have passed NASCAR's drug test had it been done properly, wanted to stay face and protect their clean image and reputation, and still barred Tim Richmond from his one final wish. On episode 87 of Dinners with Racers, Jeremy Mayfield, a 17-year veteran and 5-time Cup winner, had a conversation with Dale Earnhardt, the most popular driver in the sport. And Earnhardt warned Mayfield about where NASCAR was headed, how power at the top would shape careers, and what was coming next.
Yeah, Dale Earnhardt told me, said, I don't know if y'all have heard this before or anybody else, but I know he told me personally, because we lived kind of close to each other at the time.
Okay.
And he come to, we was talking one day, and he said, I thought he'd just give me advice like everybody does. He said, we're sitting there by ourselves. He said, boy, you better start saving your money. That's what he talked to,
Yeah.
I said, okay, save my money. I said, I've heard that before.
Kid. Yeah.
He said, no, I'm telling you. He said, you better start putting everything you can back. I said, okay, because we were talking about land or something. I had some land. He had some, and he kept saying it again. I said, well, what's going on? What are you saying? He said it won't be long. And this is exact words he said. He said, Brian France is going to take over the sport. He said, when he does, we're all done. Just like that, we're all done. Boom. I was like, man, we must know something I don't know, or I ain't heard that, but he was friends with his dad.
Yeah, okay.
And nobody thought that he would put Brian in charge of the whole thing.
Yeah.
On September 15th, 2003, Earnhardt's warning landed. Brian France became the CEO and chairman of NASCAR. And over the next 15 years, a rising sport, America's fastest growing, the second most watched ever outside of the NFL, was reshaped into something many inside and outside the garage considered a punchline. Brian France claimed on the Dale Jr. Download he never held grudges against drivers. However, history would say otherwise. And unfortunately, it would involve Jeremy Mayfield. Mayfield's career is the case study. In 2006, Ray Evernham fired Mayfield after the Brickyard 400, citing poor performance. The number 19 was outside the top 30 in the point standings. Evernham later confirmed the release following Mayfield's comments that Evernham wasn't at the track enough. Mayfield said the real problem was Evernham's close personal relationship with developmental driver Aaron Crocker, that Evernham spent more time with Crocker and her number 98 truck program than with the Cup effort. Evernham would later admit to the affair, and he and Crocker would end up marrying in 2009. Mayfield's bridges with big names were already burning. His partnership with Roger Penske with Mike Krenfuss imploded before the end of the 2001 season. With proximity to the France family and power circles, Mayfield became an easy target. Then came the blow that ended everything. On May 9, 2009, NASCAR suspended Mayfield indefinitely for violating its substance abuse policy. The program's overseer, David Black, refused to specify the substance, calling it only a drug of concern. The policy itself was extremely vague at best. Drivers felt unsafe taking anything, even legal prescriptions, fearing a career-ending misstep. Mayfield said he took 2 Claritin D tablets and prescribed Adderall for ADHD. His wife, crew chief, team members, and receipts and prescription paperwork backed him. Critics questioned NASCAR's secrecy, especially with Claritin sponsoring Carl Edwards at the time. We all know NASCAR wants to keep all their sponsors happy no matter what. Eventually, we will come to know what he was banned for: meth, speed, crank, Christina, cold, hard meth. But the whole case itself was fishy at best and coerced by NASCAR at worst. A Florida doctor in Dr. Harold Schuler stated NASCAR's claimed methamphetamine levels were impossible, that Mayfield would have been dead or a chronic user to show such levels. Dr. Schuler added that those levels would have also produced physical symptoms like sunken eyes or rotting teeth. Now here's a picture of Mayfield in 2009. Now, unless he is the world's healthiest meth head, something was not clear on NASCAR's part. On July 1st, 2009, a U.S. District Court granted a temporary injunction lifting Mayfield's suspension, stating the likelihood of a false positive was quite substantial and the harm to Mayfield outweighed the harm to NASCAR. 2 weeks later, NASCAR then said that Mayfield tested positive again 5 days after his suspension was lifted in a test conducted at Mayfield's home. Mayfield denied drug use and again explained the result of Claritin D and Adderall. 40 minutes after NASCAR's test, however, he took a test at a certified lab unaffiliated with NASCAR, and the test showed he was negative for everything, including supposedly meth. However, then a federal appeals court then reversed Mayfield's suspension, and at the end of it all, NASCAR would end up somewhat winning this case, as a judge stated on May 18, 2010 that Mayfield's suit was dismissed, ruling he had waived his right to sue NASCAR by participating in its events. Now yes, NASCAR somewhat won, but at the end of the day, no one really won. NASCAR got panned through the media, Mayfield's career was over, and it was just another expose of how NASCAR wielded power and how easily careers could be crushed. The scandal revealed NASCAR's opaque, inconsistent enforcement, and its transparency was basically non-existent. For many, it looked less like a legitimate discipline and more like a vendetta. Sometimes when someone bullies the weak, they do it to project their feelings onto someone else, in order to hide their own issues. Brian France's tenure as NASCAR CEO was marred by choices that alienated fans. The 2004 playoff format, or the chase for the cup. The corporate polish that dulled driver personalities, abandoning legacy tracks for big intermediates out west. the car of tomorrow, and accusations from drivers like Tony Stewart that NASCAR threw phantom cautions and manipulated overtimes to spice up the show. All that compiled with ratings and attendance declining beginning in 2005 and haven't stopped since then. However, then showed personal cracks. In November of 2006, witness Shirley Hill saw France driving recklessly and followed him into his Daytona Beach condo and called police after he crashed his Lexus into a tree. She watched him stumble, then reappear in different clothes. Her statement wasn't attached to the police report, however, calling it an oversight by Daytona Beach Police Chief Mike Chitwood. France admitted to drinking earlier at the Chart House, but police said they could only investigate the crash, not a DUI, since they hadn't stopped him while driving. And as a result, he walked free. It's amazing what power can do, right? Unfortunately, his power would run out, and 12 years later, he wouldn't be so lucky. While fans celebrated Chase Elliott's first career Cup Series win, France blew a stop sign in Sag Harbor, New York, about 6 hours away driving a 2017 Lexus. He was pulled over, deemed intoxicated, and found with oxycodone. His blood alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit. As a result, Brian France would be arrested and booked for DUI and criminal possession of a controlled substance. During processing, he would name drop power players, including President Donald Trump, and was quoted as saying, "Don't you know who I am?" You know, the typical response from a big name trying to get out of a crime. At the time, it was NASCAR's lowest point when his mugshot was revealed to the masses the next day. The leader, the CEO of a driving sport, was caught drunk driving. You could not get worse than that. He would end up taking a leave of absence and then would eventually step down as CEO of NASCAR. His uncle, Jim France, the brother of Bill France Jr., would take over. The story faded very quickly and relief started to spread. The sport could move forward without Brian France. However, the people he put in power, the culture he cemented, that would still be in place long after Brian France would no longer be in office. Now NASCAR faces a lawsuit with 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports over monopolistic practices. Judge Kenneth D. Bell urged settlement, warning it could get ugly. And it did, but I don't think fans, drivers, and people within the sport knew how bad it could get, at least for NASCAR. Text messages from top executives, Steve Phelps, Steve O'Donnell, Brian Herbst, Ben Kennedy, and others showed disdain for drivers, the mockery of the SRX series, and defamatory shots at Richard Childress, among other executives making fun of everyone, including the fans. That right there ruined any shot of that family first image being somewhat upheld. The mindset of NASCAR executives thinking that they are the be all and end all of racing is a toxic cycle of control and contempt, a mentality that has remained unchanged since NASCAR's birth. Scheme and win, make sure the execs stay afloat while everyone else tread water. The mask has fallen. Fans, teams, and drivers have now seen NASCAR's true colors. In what should be NASCAR working with the teams and everybody to make sure that there is a common goal to get back to the glory days of NASCAR, realize that it was the execs that just want to make sure that they kept their things happy and didn't care about anybody else. Even Richard Childress, one of NASCAR's most well-known figures, is considering a defamation suit over Phelps' comments, aligning with his public statements about how NASCAR views him and his team. With trial set for December 1st, more will surface. The PR nightmare will more than likely intensify on NASCAR. Public perception says NASCAR has lost its garage and also lost the respect of its fans. And unfortunately, out of anyone that's going to suffer, it's going to be the fans. Say what you want about the teams and NASCAR, but they're still going to make their money. They're still going to be pretty comfortable in life. Even the lawyers are going to be very comfortable in life following this trial. But it's the fans who have been through the sport through thick and thin. Even when the sport has given them bullshit after bullshit, the fans still stayed. But they are the ones that are suffering. Not just the diehards, but the new fans who want in and are getting a taste that this sport is not what they originally thought it was. Being reduced to numbers that prop up executives' bottom lines rather than valued pillars of the sport. The ball is officially in NASCAR's court, ironically. Their foundation is no longer just cracked, it's broken beyond repair. The question now becomes, are they still willing to salvage their broken foundation? Or could this be the truly new beginning of a new NASCAR?